Allah, so let me stray. Please guide my way onto the path of my deen. Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, I'm calling your name. Oh, Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a special Ramadan edition of Let's Talk on your favorite channel, Huda TV. I'm Arkham Rashid, your host. In this episode, we will be speaking about how to control your nafs, some of the benefits of controlling your nafs, and what are some practical ways in which you can start to get your nafs under control. So let's start off as usual by introducing and welcoming our guest for today. On my right hand side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
Sure, I'm Wa'al Waba. I'm a CPA and an MBA holder. I was born in the States. I lived for a while in the States, and I'm living currently in Cairo, Egypt. I'm a financial consultant. I'm looking forward to participating in the show.
All right, Wa'il, I want to welcome you on the show, and I'm looking forward to this conversation as well, inshallah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Brother, next time, if you can get your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
Yes, sir. My name is Yusuf Karma. I'm a Philadelphia native, writer, poet, activist, entrepreneur, aspiring student of knowledge. Recently moved to Egypt in hopes to attend Al-Azhar University, inshallah.
All right, inshallah, may Allah make that easy for you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation as well, inshallah.
Likewise.
All right, if I can come over to this side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
No, absolutely. My name is Hassan, and I'm from New York City, United States of America. And I've recently enrolled into Al-Azhar University with the aims of increasing my knowledge in Islam, inshallah.
Inshallah, may Allah make that easy for you.
Allahumma ameen.
I mean, Hassan, we haven't seen you on Let's Talk for a long time.
Oh, yes, you're correct. I've been traveling so much, but alhamdulillah, I've been humbled by the different traditions I've experienced, and it really gives you a sense of how blessed you really are.
Have you thought about what you're going to study at Al-Azhar?
No, I'm still contemplating it,
okay.
but I haven't pinned it down just yet.
Okay. May Allah make that easy for you. I'm
Inshallah.
looking forward to this conversation. Hassan, and once again, I want to welcome you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Brother, next time, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thank you for inviting me once again. I'm Mohammed Ital. I'm from the UK, studied law in the UK. I'm trying to study Islamic law in Al-Azhar University.
Okay, so you're a fan of law.
Yes, most definitely.
All right, may Allah make that easy for you
Ameen.
as well, inshallah. Ameen. So guys, let's start off with the very basic. Let's try to define what the nafs actually is. So Wa'il, if you can start us off trying to give us an idea, or trying to explain what nafs means to you.
Sure. Actually, I would go with the three types of nafs,
Sure.
which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described it in the Al-Quran Al-Kareem. The first one is an-nafsul ammaratu bis-su'. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to it in chapter 12, verse 53, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the human soul is certainly prone to evil. This type of nafs is the nafs which urge you to evil and wrongdoing and sins. Unfortunately, this nafs is controlled and dominated by the shaitan, and it really takes a lot of effort for the person who has this nafs to get out of this type of nafs by seeking Allah's blessing. The second type of nafs is a nafsul lawama, and actually the nafsul lawama is the nafs which blames itself, or tries to always correct itself. So it has this self-consciousness. Why did I do that? Why did I keep repeating this such a mistake? And actually, scholars say that this type of nafs is very good, because there is always a start or a room for improvement. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to this type of nafs in chapter 75, verse number 2, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, nay, I swear by the self-accusing soul. The self-accusing soul. The last type of nafs is nafsul mutma'inna. This is the calm nafs. May we all, inshallah, attain this type of nafs. This is the nafs of the believer, has confidence in inshallah, the good reward, well understand the names of Allah and the attributes of Allah, believe in the messengers and the day of judgment and the departure day from this dunya. May Allah, give us this type of nafs.
Inshallah. I mean, so those that we can say are the different categories of nafs.
Right.
Now, how can a person understand nafs For that, I'm going to come to Yusuf. Yusuf, what's your thoughts on this?
Sure, and this, as the brother started off, Allah Ta'ala said in the Quran, وَمَا حَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْعُرُورِ. And what is this worldly life except a temporary period of enjoyment? So you understand the nafs in context to what is available in the world. So the Prophet ﷺ, قال ابن أبي هريرة قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الدنيا سجن المؤمن وجنة الكافر. That this world is a prison for the believer and it's a paradise for the disbeliever. What is the purpose of this? Because the nafs, it wants to indulge in everything. So for the Muslim, for the believer, the Sharia constrains us to law. So we aren't able to indulge in things that our nafs want, such as, the things that you see on the TV, such as partying, alcoholism, and things like this. We aren't allowed to obey our nafs in that regard. So for the disbeliever, you're allowed to engage your nafs in any way possible, and indulge in all these things because you don't have anything to constrain you. So there was a man who approached Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani while he was walking through the town, and he said, "Ya Sheikh, isn't your prophet the one who said that the dunya is a prison for the believer and heaven for the kafir?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Then how is it that you're walking through this town in such, fine clothing?" He said, "Well, compared to what Allah has prepared for me in the akhirah, this life is a prison. The things that you see me now, it's a prison. And compared to what Allah may have prepared for you in the akhirah, if you don't change your trajectory, this world is a paradise for you." So it's all about how you use your nafs to either gain that which is good for you, that which is for your akhirah, or use it to please yourself in this dunya.
Yeah, and that's a very good way of looking at it. And one thing I'd like to add is that, that story is amazing because it reminds us that just because this world is a prison doesn't mean we have to, wear the scruffiest of clothes, we have to not look good. This means that, imagine if this is a prison for us, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in store for us later on in Jannah, and how we should be thankful for that, and how we should be grateful for what we have in this world. Hassan, I'm going to come to you. Yes. Same kind of question, if you can explain the nafs here.
Sure, and I agree with my brothers here. I love the different points they're giving, and I'd like to further elaborate on the brother here on the different types of nafs.
Sure.
Of course, as he said, there's the nafs al-amara, which is prone to evil, and you have the nafs al-lawwama, which is sort of between falsehood and truth. Yeah. It's back and forth, it's constantly rectifying itself. And then you have the nafs al-mutma'inna, which is the calm soul, the reassured soul, the soul that finds, the self that finds peace and it's in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a fourth actual category here that the scholars have come to a consensus to. And I find it very interesting, and they call it the nafs al-nabatiyya. This is the vegetative soul. And the interesting about this vegetative soul, as the ayah states, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ, is that Allah says here that from every living thing we've made out of water. And this nabati soul is sourced from water. And the nature of water is that it's pure, but it also has the ability to be polluted. Rain is pure, but once it hits the ground, it has the ability to be polluted. But then again, it has the ability to be purifying, just as wudu does. It purifies us. And so that's the exact same thing with the nature of the nafs. The nafs, just as water can be pure, just as water, it can be polluted, and just as water, it can be purifying. And one of the wonders of water that all the other elements don't have, of the creation of Allah, is that it has the ability to take on the form of gas, liquid, and it can be a solid. Now, the interesting about this in relation to the nature of the nafs is that the nafs is temptation heats up, and this is the gassy form of the water. It heats up and it rises to pride and arrogance. And in regards to the liquid form, the liquid form, it takes on its environment. For example, if you put water into a container, however the container is shaped, you'll find that the water will take on that shape. And this is similar to the nafs al-lawwama, as the water is constantly shifting from truth to falsehood. And so if it's in a bad environment, it'll take on the bad of that environment. Yeah. And if it's a good environment, it'll take on the good of that environment. The most beautiful of these is the solid, as if you have a nafs that is pure and it solidifies itself, then it affirms the oneness of its Lord, and it's basically become one of the angels, as لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمْرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. It does not obey its Lord, And this is a mirror of pious people.
Wow, subhanAllah, that's such a beautiful and vivid example that you gave there. Let Mamadou say like, ooh.
Nah, subhanAllah, I don't know how I'm going to follow on from that.
Yeah, I don't know how you can do that either.
SubhanAllah, that was an amazing description of the nafs. I haven't heard that before, so thank you very much, Hassan, for that.
Thank you very much, Hassan, for that. That was very good, actually. Mamadou, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, only to add to that, I would say the nafs, for me, what I've understood the nafs to be is that thing inside that says, I want this.
The ego.
The ego, I must have this. For me, that is the nafs. And I find that when it's the ruh, the spirit, the jism, the body, and the qalb, the heart, when those all come together, that also equal what the nafs is. And I think just stepping back to kind of emphasize the importance of the nafs, when Allah swears by the nafs, Allah swears by many things in the Quran, but He swears by the nafs, and then He swears by the ones who fashions it. So He swears by the nafs, and the same ayah, He swears by Himself. So He's putting that in the same sentence. Then He says, and the one who taught it right from wrong. And the one who is successful is the one who purifies it. And the one who is corrupted is the one who perished. So I kind of feel that as Muslims, we are taught to kind of purify our nafs. And, and when we purify our nafs, we get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay, and I mean, building off of that answer there, that as Muslims we're taught to purify our nafs, to keep it under check. What's the importance of that? Why is there such an emphasis by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by the Sharia to keep your nafs under check? Wael, if we can start with you.
Sure. Actually, I think the importance of checking what type of nafs it is to attain piety or taqwa. I look to Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu arda, how he describes the taqwa. So he says that the piety or the taqwa is the الخوف من الجليل والرضا بالتنزيل الخوف من الجليل والعمل بالتنزيل والرضا بالقليل والاستعداد ليوم الرحيل. So this is how he describes piety, as it is the fear of the majestic Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the complying or abating with the revelation, and being satisfied with the little, and being ready for the departure to the judgment day. Al-Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah be pleased with him, has a very good saying about the creation of angels, animals, and mankind. So Al-Imam Ibn al-Qayyim says that angels, like you just said, brother, لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. The angels are created for a reason of worshipping, and they don't have any desires. They don't eat, they don't drink, they don't sleep, they don't mate, and so on. As for animals, they are not required to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All they do is following desires, as far as eating, drinking, mating, sleeping, and so on. As for mankind, he is he has the both. So he has desires, and on the other hand, he is created for a reason, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Al-Imam Ibn al-Qayyim says the human being is between these two sides. If his desires overcomes, he's worshipping Allah, so he's closer to an animal. And vice versa. If he's closer to Allah and worshipping Allah more than his desires and passions, so he is closer to an angel.
MashaAllah. I'd actually add to that in terms of the animals not worshipping Allah. I think they do actually worship Allah because the Prophet said they are like communities unto us. And there's a beautiful ayah where Allah says, أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالطَّيْرُ صَافَاتٍ كُلٌّ أُولَٰئِكَ قَدْ عَلِمَ صَلَاتَهُ وَتَسْبِيحَهُ
كل
قَدْ عَلِمَ صَلَاتَهُ وَتَسْبِيحَهُ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِمَا يَفْعَلُونَ. So this is an indicator that even animals do worship their Lord. But we don't do that now. Yeah.
So then it's worse than animals.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yusuf, I'm going to come to you. What are some of the importance of controlling one's nafs?
Yeah, speaking of animals, while we're on the subject, firstly, Allah Ta'ala says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسْبُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. And don't be like the one who forgot Allah and Allah caused them to forget themselves. So there's a story of a man who was who had a horse. He purchased this beautiful horse, spent all of his income on buying this horse. And he saw him in the desert, and he was carrying the horse on his back. So people will walk by and say, "Foolish man, why are you carrying this horse on your back? You were supposed to ride the horse." And he said, "The horse is too unruly. I can't control it. It doesn't go where I want it to go. It doesn't obey me. You know, I can't do anything with the horse, so I'm carrying the horse myself." And they said, "Foolish man, that horse is for you to ride." He said, "The horse is too unruly. I can't control it, so I'm going to carry the horse." So, and this horse is the example of the nafs. If you don't control your nafs will control you. It will take you to wherever it wants you to go. It will take you to any place, and it will be unruly, and you will have no control, and you will look like a man that's carrying a horse because you don't have your nafs under control. And it will put you in bad circumstances, bad positions. It will cause friction between you and family members, you and friends, because you don't have your nafs in check. It will destroy your life. But if you have your nafs in check, you will get on the horse, it will take you where you want it to go. Your life will be that much easier, that much more productive in this way. So that's the example of the nafs.
Okay, I mean, we're having so many good examples today. I mean, it's so interesting. Each time I hear something new, and each example is so vivid and descriptive, and liking it. Mani, I want to come over to you. What's your thoughts on this? And hopefully you have another example to share with
the
us.
points of controlling the soul, I think simply put, once you attain complete control of the soul, it leads to a beautiful soul. And that's what we are all looking for, a beautiful soul. And it's said that the angel of death, Azrael, when he appears to the good soul, he appears to him in a beautiful, like magnificent form. Whereas when he appears to the bad soul, he appears to it in a bastardly sort of hideous state. And I find it really interesting the words that Azrael uses to describe the beautiful soul. And as it extracts it from the soul, he says, and I quote, "Ya ayyatuha an-nafsu at-tayyiba fi jasadin tayyib, ikhriji anti tayyiba." He says, "Oh, beautiful soul, in a beautiful form, exit, you are beautiful." And bear in mind, he's in a beautiful state himself. And I just find these words so reassuring, and it's basically glad tidings to paradise. I mean, the angel of death appearing to you in such a beautiful form and saying these beautiful words. And it's something for us to bear in mind.
Yeah. What's it called? Before I get to the last question, I'm going to come to you, Mamadou. But what I want to do is also keep in mind, guys, that we're going to be speaking about practical examples and practical ways in which a person can start controlling his nafs. So I just want to let you guys know that before I come to Mamadou, so you guys can start, jotting down some notes and thinking of some ideas that we can share with the viewers. So Mamadou, I'm going to ask you first about the importance of controlling nafs, and then we're going to go and speak about some of the practical examples of how a person can control his nafs. Go ahead, Mamadou.
I feel that sometimes we all study Islam, so Sharia. We all study Iman, Aqidah, sciences, faith. And sometimes we neglect the third aspect, worship Allah ka'annaka tara, as if you see Him. And if you do not see Him, know that He sees you. And I think sometimes we forget that aspect many of times. And I find that for me I understand that to mean that is having awareness of Allah at all times. And I find like the only time you will commit wrong action is having heedlessness. The only time you commit wrong action, or the only time your nafs can control you, is when you are not aware of Allah. When you forget Allah, you forget yourself. You forget that your purpose is to worship Allah and to come to know Allah. So I find that through remembrance of Allah and constant state of dhikr, you can avoid being controlled by your nafs in that way.
So the idea is that you control your nafs and not allow your nafs to control yourself or you. What we want to do now is speak about some of the actual practical ways in which a person can control his nafs, and that's the most important part of the show, because everything else is just theory. I mean, it is a beautiful idea that we should have our nafs under control. It's a beautiful idea that once a person controls his nafs, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for him to enter paradise, and his life will become easier because he's not controlled by his nafs. He's not committing those sins that he used to commit. But how can a person start controlling his nafs. That's what we want to discuss here. Wa'il, if we can start with you.
Actually, this is back like 3-4 days. I was listening to a lecture, and you know, the Sheikh said a statement which it was said before, and you know, I was like very touched with the statements. He was talking about how to control an-nafs. So in the beginning, he referred to al-hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, do not be angry, do not be angry. And then he referred to a statement which says al-mautu sahmun ursila ilayk wa umruka biqadar safaruhu ilayk, meaning that for every human being, death is an arrow which has been released towards you. And the lifetime of any person is the duration of this arrow to reach you. So after listening to this a lecture, I was driving back home, and in a roundabout or in a circle, I have the right of the way, and I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, and all of a sudden a guy like cut me over. And thank God, I tried not to get into accident. You know how driving is bad here in Egypt. And something unique, about Egypt too, that people like honk the horn, not just to alarm people. It's used for, to say hi, bye, how are you? And sometimes it's used to curse people as well. So I got this. So Alhamdulillah, I didn't get to an accident. I have the right of the way and everything. But the guy, honked the horn, and he cursed me. So I was about, like, go within the roundabout and go after him, I didn't do anything. But I thought about it for a minute. لا تغضب, لا تغضب. How to control my nafs at this moment, and I just let it go.
Yeah, and those are the different ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. We see many times that he's advised people when they come to him that don't do this, or don't steal, or the best of you is the one who does this, or the best of you is the one who's the kindest to his family. And you notice that the wisdom changes depending on the asker. So the Prophet ﷺ saw that this person has an issue with his anger, so he told him that the Prophet ﷺ saw this person is not kind with his family, so he told him the best of you are the ones who are kindest to their family. So depending on the person, the Prophet ﷺ would try to give him the best possible advice that would change that person's life, that would change, or that would give that person what he needs. Because that person might not have anger issues, but he might have other issues. So does that apply to him? So that's one good way of doing it. We look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and we look at our deficiencies and where we lack, let's say wisdom, for example. Say a person gets into a fight very quickly, then he should take the ahadith dealing with not getting into a fight, and the best of you is not the one who's the strongest physically, rather the best of you is the one who can control his anger. So I think each hadith is tailored towards specific people. Yusuf, I want to come to you. What are some practical advices you can give to us?
Yeah, likewise, the same advice the Prophet ﷺ said that مَنْ تُؤْمِنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَيَقُولُ خَيْرٌ أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. That whoever believes in Allah and the last day, if he doesn't have anything, he should say something good. Other than that, he should be quiet. And also, the terminology used here is very interesting. لِيَصْمُتْ. I found that in the Arabic language, usually, our teachers in school, they say, uskut, وَلَا تَتَكَلَّمْ, be quiet, don't speak, don't say anything, right? But in this hadith, it said, usmut. And usmut, the difference between usmut and uskut here is that usmut is to be quiet in such a way that you don't have the ability to speak. Someone who is mute, who doesn't even have the capacity to speak if they wanted to. And uskut is just be quiet, but you still have the ability to speak. So if you don't have anything good to say, then you should be quiet in such a way that you don't even have the ability to speak. And many times an indication of someone who doesn't have control of their desires, it will come either by way of their mouth, or the things they say, or by their lower desires. So that's the first indication of somebody that doesn't have self-control, is they can't control their tongue. It's like a few days ago, I was in a store, and there was a young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, and he was talking to me crazy, just like, extremely rude. And I was thinking to him, like, I could like bench press you like 100 times, right?
Say, boy, I could eat you.
Exactly. But because you don't have control over your mouth, your body may have to suffer because of that. But sometimes people, seriously, because they don't have control, their body has to suffer because of their mouth. In this life and the hereafter.
And there's another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which you reminded me of when you mentioned that it speaks about the two parts of your body that a person should safeguard. And one of the ones he mentions is the tongue.
Right.
Because the tongue causes so much harm to yourself and to others. You know, just by saying something hurtful, it hurts his feelings, the person that you say it to, his or her feelings, and it also at the same time makes you a worse person. It also at the same time puts that black dot on your heart. Mani, I'm going to come over to you. Can you give us some practical advice, inshallah?
Of course. I'd actually like to elaborate on the hadith that Mamudu gave, as I believe that that's a good way of keeping the nafs in control. أَن تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. I believe if we deeply pondered and understood this hadith, that our hearts would tremble. Like every time we are about to commit a wrongful act, and we think of this hadith that Allah is seeing, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. He knows what you're doing. And we should tremble, and this is a good way to keep our nafs in check. But of course, the nature of this world is that it's filled with distractions, and we've become out of tune, out of touch with reality, and sort of desensitized. So ultimately, I think the greatest asset is hope. Like لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. Don't lose hope in the mercy of your Lord. And I'd like to quote a Gnostic scholar. He goes by the name of Ibn Abbad. Unfortunately, I haven't committed his quote to memory, but I've noted it here, if you'd allow me to read it.
Sure, sure.
I believe it's greatly beneficial to whomever chooses to adhere to it. And he says here, do not abandon the remembrance for your lack of mindful presence with Allah. Your heedlessness in the absence of remembering Him is worse than your heedlessness while remembering Him. It may be that He will raise you from the heedless remembrance to a wakeful remembrance, from wakeful remembrance to a remembrance with presence of mind, from present remembrance to a remembrance absent from everything apart from the one remembered. And that is not difficult for Allah. It's a beautiful, beautiful advice here. And he goes on to say that remembrance is actually the shortest path to Allah. And it's a sure sign of the saint. So I believe if we constantly have the presence of mind of our Creator, and the reason why we were created, this is a great way of keeping our nafs in check.
Before I move on to Mahmoud, I just wanted to say that Morgan Freeman narration. Mahmoud, what's some practical advice that you can give us?
I mean, just to reiterate what Hassan said, is being aware of the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, Allah says in the Quran, wherever you turn is the face of Allah. And I find that these points are very illustrated in the Quran in two places. When Musa alayhi salam says, "Do not fear, with me is my Lord," and Prophet in the cave of Abu Bakr says, "Do not fear, Allah is with us." So having that presence of Allah is the first step of controlling your nafs. Then I would say you have to find out, as you said, find out what it is about you that you need. There are spiritual diseases, there are diseases of the heart. What is it that you lack? What is it that you need? For example, Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah said, if you have problem with lowly desires or shahawat, reduce your food intake. Fast. That's just one practical example that I find.
Yeah. And now what we want to do is we want to speak about, after mentioning some of these examples, we want to get into some of the stories that took place at the companions' times or the prophets that showed them trying to control their nafs and trying to overcome their nafs. But before we do that, we're going to go for a short break, so stay tuned.
Perfect, my highest praise. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah, how perfect you are.
This is Mamdouh Muhammad, and I'd like to remind you that we are humans, and humans err and make mistakes. If you think that you make mistakes, if you think that you have sins, if you want your sins to be erased, and I'm sure that everybody wants, this is the golden opportunity. Join me in the month of Ramadan at this program, The Oasis of Ramadan, at Huda TV.
welcome back to Let's Talk. Now, before we went for that short break, we were discussing some of the practical ways in which a person can control his nafs. Now, what we want to do, and what we said that we will do after the short break, is that we will give some of the stories from the companions or from any of the Prophet's lives which showed them trying to control their nafs and showed them trying to overcome their nafs. And we'll start off with Wa'il, inshallah.
Actually, I don't have a story right now, but I can refer to Sayyidina Ibn Ata. He has a very good statement on the nafs and on general the situation of a believer with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, إذا أردت أن تعرف عند الله مقامك فانظر فيما أقامك. If you want to know what's your status or position or stand with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look at the state where you are. So meaning if you have good actions and doing good deeds, that's mean you are closer to Allah. If you are doing sins and doing bad deeds, that's mean that you're far away from Allah.
Okay, yeah, and that's actually quite a famous saying, that if you want to know your position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, check your position. Where does Allah lie with you? Is He close to you? Is He the first thing that you think of? Is He the first thing or the first person that you turn to? Yusuf, I'm going to come to you. What are some of the stories you can share with us?
Yeah, there's a very famous story that we know that comes between Abu Dhar and Bilal ibn Rabah that we know of when Abu Dhar, may Allah Ta'ala be pleased with him, one day he reproached Bilal by saying, Ya Ibn Aswad, O son of the black mother. And Bilal, upon hearing this, he became very upset and he went directly to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and he complained. So the Prophet ﷺ called Abu Dhar and said, is this what you said to Bilal? And he said, yes. He said, indeed, you're a man that still have traces of jahiliyyah within you. Right. And he became very upset and he said, there is no virtue. He said, by the one who sent the Quran down to Muhammad, there is no virtue in any skin color except the person of righteousness. Right? So Abu Dhar, what did he do? Immediately he went to Bilal and he put his head on the ground. He put his face on the ground and told Bilal to step on his head to remove the jahiliyyah, the ignorance from his head. So this is one way that you can, deal with your desires, in that when you're reprimanded, when someone gives you something that is better, don't justify your action, don't try to find excuses for it. Immediately go and seek forgiveness for that deed. And you find a lot of people, especially when it comes to nafs, the desires, racism is deeply embedded within the nafs. You find people racist towards other Muslims just because of the skin color, and it's something that's ludicrous. And it began with Shaitan, was saying that, I'm better than Adam because he was created from mud and I was created from fire, when in reality the mud is actually better than the fire, it's more virtuous than the fire. And scholars give many examples of this. But it's the nafs, that thing that says, the ego that says I'm better than you because of these reasons, it's something that leads us to destruction.
Yeah, subhanAllah. And it is when we give into the nafs, when we give into that type of racism, that type of discrimination, then that controls us. And for Abu Dhar to actually go and put his face on the ground, the most valuable part of your body on the ground, it just shows the amount of regret he had for what he said. And the amount of, it showed the Prophet's anger with him as well, that he wanted to remove what he did as if it never existed, and he wanted Bilal to forgive him so that the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't be angry with him. And it showed that the Prophet ﷺ didn't tolerate these things. It wasn't something that, okay, it happened, or it's something small, that's it, let it pass, he said something small. This was something big. And it's not that he physically discriminated against him, he just said something, and that shows how angry the Prophet ﷺ got with just a saying. Just a type of curse, we can say. It wasn't even that he physically discriminated. So imagine if somebody physically discriminated against somebody else. SubhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from that. Mani, I want to come to you, and if you can share some of the stories that you had in mind.
Indeed, I'd like to start with some of the greatness of the companions, and as a result of their control of their nafs. And well, the companions are like, outside of the Anbiya, of course, are like a pleasure to the earth. The earth actually has pleasure in bearing these individuals. You have a companion, the companion that actually, when he was being questioned by the angels, Munkar and Nakir, he actually flipped the question onto them and asked them, who is your Lord and what is your book? And affirming his ranking above and beyond the angels as a result of how they control their nafs. And there's a narration that the Prophet says, and he speaks about this great Sahabi his name he goes by the name of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, and he was fortunate enough to have his appointment with the angel of death at the masjid of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's narrated that upon the angel of death seeing the soul of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, the entire creation shook. And what type of soul is that the entire creation shakes for? And then upon extracting his soul, the expression that the Prophet gave is اهتز لموتي عرش الرحمن. Like the throne of Allah actually shook. And why would the creation shake for a mere soul? And it says فرحانا لقدوم روح سعد. Literally the creation was elated, was ecstatic to receive this soul, to the ascension of the soul penetrating the heavens. And so this is an example of a beautiful soul, something we should all aspire to. And how do we aspire to such heights? Well, it's a beautiful example that Ibn al-Qayyim gives in the story of Abu Bakr, when it's narrated that he used to every morning go to the outskirts of Medina and visit this tent. And he'd enter the tent every morning. He'd do this, and Omar began to get a bit curious. What is Abu Bakr doing every morning? So he follows him. He follows Abu Bakr. He watches Abu Bakr as he enters the tent, and a short time later, Abu Bakr exits, and Omar enters. Omar sees a woman lying on the floor, and he asks her, well, "Who are you?" And she says she's a poor, blind, and she has no help aside from the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he then asks her, who was just in the tent with you? And she says, by Allah, she does not know who he is, but what she does know is that he comes every morning, cleans her house, cooks her food, and milks her cattle. I mean, what type of soul is this? Like, it's a beautiful soul. And the example of these companions, it's heartwarming. And literally, I don't know what to say any further, really. This is amazing stuff. And actually, as advice, they say that we should deeply ponder the stories of the companions. For that, in every story of the companion, there's a similar story, similar hardship that they're going through that's sort of mirrors what you're going through. And in their story, you'll find a solution to your problems. So I think the companions are great beings, and we should definitely ponder upon the stories far more.
Yeah, and I definitely advise the viewers to read some of the stories of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. There's so much that you can extract from it, so much that you can see that in situations similar to yours, how the companions of the Prophet ﷺ reacted. What I'm going to do now is, Mamadou, I'm going to ask you the same question, if you have any stories to share with us. After that, we'll get into some of the ways a person can start to control his nafs. For example, the viewers now, they're watching this. Now a person decides, I want to change, I want to start controlling my nafs. What are steps that we can start taking to start controlling our nafs? But before that, Mamadou, I would like to ask if you have any stories to share with us.
I don't have a specific story, but something that does come to mind is when I always heard that the Prophet ﷺ used to seek Allah's forgiveness 100 times a day. And then I've always wondered, because as I was taught, we believe that the Prophets are infallible. They can do no wrong action. The haram is haram for them. So I always thought, what is this about? And I do remember reading some of the scholars said that this was just because any moment the Prophet ﷺ was not aware of the presence of Allah, just for a moment, he sought forgiveness from that. He sought forgiveness from being almost forgetful of Allah. So I also found that to be very so the common theme today is that it's the presence of Allah. Being in that presence of Allah is when you're not paying attention to your nafs, when you're not following your nafs. I do know of some later stories of that. Some of the shuyukh said that, imagine that the most feared, respected person that you know is in the room, and how you would act. You act in a certain way, even if it's the president or the king or whoever it is, you act in a certain way. Imagine that Allah is always with you. How should you act when it's the King of Kings with you? Also, one of the sheikhs did say, from West Africa, said that to the children, go out and go take this sweet and go and eat it when no one will see you. So every child went and ate their sweet and they found the corner. And one child came back and said, I couldn't eat the sweet. Why couldn't you eat the sweet? Because I couldn't find a place Allah wasn't watching me. You know? And another story that comes to mind, I do think another story.
That seemed like a personal story. That happened.
And then there was another story of a man and a woman. A man who was, you know, who really wanted this woman badly. And he said to the woman, if I find a place, if I can guarantee we won't get caught and no one will see us, will you do this act with me, the sexual act with her? And she goes, fine, I agree. So they went to he brought her over to his house. He closed the doors, closed the windows, dimmed the lights, you know. There was no one physically could see, lock all the doors. Okay, this is going to happen, this is going to go down tonight, finally, yeah? Then she said, are you sure you locked all the doors? He goes, yes. He goes, but there's one person that can still see us. And he goes, no, I don't worry, I'm telling you, no one can see us. He goes, no, Allah can see us. You know, Allah can see us. And he, you know, broke down in tears and said, you know, it's true. She left and they couldn't get the act done. That story always reminds me of the Nafs as well.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, that's where taqwa comes in.
Yeah.
To remember and to be conscious and to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all moments of your life, no matter what you're doing. Because certain times, yes, you can get away with things according to the law. Nobody will see you according to I mean, if you see $100 bill on the floor, yes, you can take it. Nobody would know you ever took it.
Right.
Nobody would ever know that's not your $100. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching, and that's where taqwa comes in. That's where your conscience has to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what I'm doing. And do I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then for you to do the right thing after that. Now what we're going to do is just quickly speak about some of the steps a person can take if they want to start controlling their nafs. Well, if I can start with you.
Sure. I would, as far as the steps, I would go back to the blaming nafs or the nafs al-lawama. I mean, doing mistakes or doing sins, it's a part of human nature. And the Prophet ﷺ said that every son of Adam make mistakes, and the best of those who make mistakes are those who repent. So we should always blame ourselves, stop doing mistakes, repent, regret on what we did, and have the intention and the action not to do mistakes again. I think this is the best way to control nafs and to keep monitoring your nafs.
Okay.
To elaborate on that, if I
Yeah,
may,
sure.
there's a hadith Qudsi that says that Ummat Muhammad Ummatun Muznibatun. Lakin Rabbu Ghafurun. And so the very nature of the nation of Muhammad is that they will sin. And it's just actually a blessing that we do sin, because this keeps us from pride. Pride in our worship, pride in the good things that we do. So you know, we should thank Allah for this ni'mah that He has given us, but we should not excess in it. Whenever we can, we should definitely rectify ourselves. But you make a beautiful point there.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for adding that, Mane.
Jazakallah.
Yusuf, I'm going to come to you. Any first steps you would share with somebody? I mean, you can speak from personal experience. What would you do? You can speak from a theoretical point of view, however you want.
Yeah, personally, as my sheikha says, my mother, she says that I prefer to be with the devil I know than the devil I don't know. And Jalaluddin al-Rumi, he says in his Mathnawi, he says that the animal soul, referring to Nafs al-Amara, he said it's like an animal, and the more you feed the animal, the more stronger it becomes to attack you, the more aggressive it becomes, the more healthy it becomes, and it's preparing to attack you. So the enemy is the same in this way in terms of the nafs. If you don't know your trouble, if you don't know your weaknesses, they will just grow. Somewhere in the darkness just grow, and it will come and overpower you. So it's better to take account of yourself, to be aware of yourself. As Umar ibn Khattab said, take account of 5 before 5. It's better to know these things, to know your devil, to know your weaknesses, than to not know of them, to be unaware of them and allow them to overpower you. So whatever it is that they're struggling with, it's best to be aware of it and to not, sort of sweep it under the rug or, put it aside. We have this tendency in Muslim communities to, sort of be shy of saying that I have this weakness or this something is wrong with me. That's why alcoholism is unspoken, it's taboo in the Muslim community. We have people battling with serious drug issues, with, different ideologies, but they don't say anything because they're afraid of being judged. It's better for someone to say, to acknowledge, this is my issue, I'm human. This is what's wrong with me, and then you begin to battle with these desires. There was a brother who was smoking marijuana one time in Philadelphia, And a brother saw him, right? You know, it's Philly, it's crazy, right? And a brother saw him, you know, he was in some little place, you know, by himself doing it. And a brother saw him, drove by and saw him. He said, man, wallahi, I'm going to tell the imam on you. He said, Allah already knows I smoke weed. What do I care if you tell the imam for? Right? So we need to get away from this idea of trying to please people or, you know, being afraid of people. If this is something that you're dealing with, if this is something that you're not, you need to check and to say, I need to take accountability of myself. This is how I'm going to get better. But if every day you're hiding, you know, you won't come around the brothers because you know they're going to judge you, you won't ever change. But if I can feel comfortable to say, this is what's wrong with me, I can, well, what advice do you have for me? Ya Sheikh Alkum, what kind of advice do you have for me? Mawlana Hassan, how can you advise me? And nobody's going to say, I'm going to tell the imam on you. Then that way I can begin to check my nerves. And also, my environment is such an environment that all helps me to grow in this way.
And I think at another point as well that it's important for imams and for religious leaders and community leaders to be accepting and to be open-minded and to not judge the people that come to them, or else they'll never open up and they'll never say their problems. If you're going to be judgmental, you're going to be, oh, astaghfirullah, get out the masjid.
Sure.
Your job is to rectify and try to help him remove his mistakes, not to just bash him and kick him out of the masjid. So that was a very good story that you shared. Hassan, we got about 3 minutes left, guys, so you can split it between yourselves.
Oh, okay. No, just to precisely put it, if we just follow the Quran and the Sunnah, you know, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allaha wa ati'u ar-rasula, you know, more specifically, we should definitely try and perfect the smaller things. I mean, like our prayer, our 5 daily prayers. Attaining a spiritual state is key. And there's this, when you attain a certain spiritual state, the nafs has no choice but to subdue itself.
Okay, Mamadou?
I think as well, I mean, just to reiterate, just to kind of achieve what our purpose is in life. Our purpose is to worship Allah. And the companions said that worship here means to know, come to know Allah, come to realize Allah is everywhere. So I think once we start realizing that, we should have more control of our nafs and control it and not let it control us.
And just to conclude, the hadith,
If you wanted the last one.
we just ponder upon this hadith, أخلص في دينك يكفيك عمل قليل. Just perfecting your religion, the smallest aspects of your religion, it's enough to do little deeds.
Alright, I want to thank all you guys for coming out here. It was a wonderful episode. So many nice stories that were said, so many jokes. It was interesting and I loved it. So once again, thank you very much for coming out here and sharing your thoughts and your ideas with the viewers here. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you guys. I hope you guys benefited and enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys' Ramadan is going great. And until next week, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How perfect my Allah is, and I praise Him. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, Subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, I'm calling your name, Allah. I call you, I need you, Allahu Akbar, Allah. Your mercy is great.